How's it going, bros? My name is See You Next Thursday. Yep, I lost a bet. Anyway, today I'm going to wrap up Ken's seminar about how science confirms the Bible. Almost. I could do another full half-an-hour video and finish it in one sitting, but Christmas, being the most busy time of the year, means that this is going to be split in half. Really sorry about that, but it is what it is. If you've watched Ken's original video, you may notice a significant time jump, just because Ken rambles on about evolution that I've already explained why he's wrong on, so for the sake of time, I'm leaving it out. It's also fuck off hot here, so if you can hear the fan in the background, I'm sorry, but it's keeping me alive. In any case, roll the brand new intro.
My intentions are pure, but I'm just a bit blunt. And to a few select people, I'm the world's greatest cunt.
Na na na, na 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 na. Fuck, I love that song. What do you mean I'm supposed to be responding to Ken's... Fucking play the video, you know just how to ruin my day, you fucking cunt.
You see layers like those at the Grand Canyon. Some of those layers are filled with fossils and they extend across the continental US, and you find them in continents around the world. They're even global in extent. Then how could such have been formed? They had to be formed after sin.
I mean, millions of years of depositional events. You know, the science that's backed up by an entire field of professional geologists. The people who have authority where both of us don't. I mean, if you have evidence apart from my book, go ahead and claim your Nobel Prize, but I can guarantee you don't. Oh, and like the majority of Christians, you don't have to believe in a young Earth. Old Earth creationism, while still unfalsifiable and thus unscientific, doesn't require you to spit in the face of nearly every field of science. Come on, Ken.
Is there anything in the Bible that could tell us about any way in which you could have all of these fossil layers, or a lot of these fossil layers at least laid down, and it has to be after sin? Can anyone think of any event?
For fuck's sake, now I have to deal with your shitty flood fable's inability to stand up to geology? For making me deal with a science that isn't biology, I dub thee a fucking shit cunt. Moving on.
Is there any event? Oh, the flood of Noah's day. If you think about biblical history, a perfect creation marred by sin. Oh, then there was a global flood. Hey, if there was a global flood, what would you expect to find? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth.
No, I wouldn't expect that. I'd expect to find a series of rock layers arranged according to hydrologic sorting and very few fossils that are isolated to specific rock layers. I'd also expect fossils that cross strata and not just the occasional fucking tree. Finally, there should be no fossils with any indication, or next to no fossils, that were partially consumed before burial, such as tooth marks on the bone. Unfortunately, not at all what we find.
And what do you find? Actually, billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth.
Sure, Ken. And there's a magic sky daddy watching over us when we sleep. What do you mean he actually believes that?
And so then we can ask this question, okay, well, is there any evidence for a global flood? Well, billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Now, of course, in the public school textbook, students will be indoctrinated. When you look at layers of the Grand Canyon, they were laid down slowly over millions of years. But actually, when you do some research, you find some problems with that.
There really aren't any problems with that. There isn't anything that suggests a series of erosional depositional events couldn't have formed the geologic strata. So let's hear it. Why does the great scientific mind of Ken Ham reject science this time?
For instance, the boundary between the Coconino Sandstone and the Hermit Formation. Did you know when you see that in various places in the Grand Canyon, there's a straight line there. The Coconino Sandstone was laid down directly on the Hermit Shale. But what's the problem with that? Well, when you actually go to Sedona, around Sedona, south of the Grand Canyon, there's, in some places, 1,000-foot thick hill formation in between those layers that supposedly took 5 to 10 million years to be laid down. But when you go to the Grand Canyon area, there's no evidence that that was ever there. It looks like those layers were laid one on top of the other, which is what you'd expect from massive flood.
Unfortunately, I can't find a more detailed version of this argument so that I can actually get Ken's position here. I just have a bunch of photos of the Hermit Shale and Coconino Sandstone from the Grand Canyon on my hard drive now, so there's that. I guess that's because normal humans realize that not every rock layer will be represented everywhere. If there wasn't a ton of activity, geologically speaking, for that 10 million year period before the Coconino Sandstone was laid down, then what we see is not at all surprising. That is, even if you're telling the truth. We have on many occasions witnessed that you don't.
Now, there's many other evidences that we can look at too. When Mount St. Helens erupted on May 18th, 1980, there were thousands of layers that were laid down, and many feet of strata were laid down by what were called hurricane velocity steam-driven ash flows. Pyroclastic flows, they're called, and sedimentary strata, actually behaves the same sort of way. This is really sedimentary strata, and if you look at this layer here, it's over 20 feet thick, and it has thousands of individual layers that was actually laid down in just a few hours. Doesn't take millions of years. It doesn't take millions of years to sort out layers.
We don't just look for a visual distinction when the classification of layers is considered, we also look for a change in the composition of those layers. While what you have presented looks a lot like layers, they are all just igneous rock, making them a single layer. Hell, even if you are right, volcanic eruptions are quite far removed from depositional events, the way quote-unquote normal layers are formed. So, nice cherry-picked example, but it's hardly applicable.
And in fact, when you go to Mount St. Helens now, there's lots of vegetation covering this up now, but after that eruption, there was a mud flow that carved a 120-foot canyon with steep cliffs and allowed the North Fork of the Toutle River to go through. But if you were to go there, what normally happens when you go to a canyon and you see a river down the bottom, you're told how long did it take the river to erode the canyon? But how do you know the canyon wasn't eroded to allow the river to come through?
There's a significant difference between the Grand Canyon and the canyon caused by the Mount St. Helens mudslide. The Mount St. Helens mudslide was a rapid erosion of loose rocks, gravels, ash, mud, and the remains of pyroclastic flows. This is significantly more susceptible to erosion than the limestone, sandstone, and shale and metamorphic granite of the Grand Canyon. That's how we know the Grand Canyon was formed over millions of years, Ken. The slightest amount of research would tell you that. Ken, come on!
Which is what we would say happened at the Grand Canyon. In fact, there were mud flows that carved through other canyons through hard rock, basalt rock, over 100 feet deep, and it didn't take millions of years. The other thing is when you go to the Grand Canyon, you'll notice that you go up. You go up onto the Kaibab Plateau. The whole area has been raised up. And this is another interesting aspect because you can actually look at various places where you see rock layers that have been raised up in the Grand Canyon, but this is another one of those instances where you have the Temple Butte limestone sitting on top of the Moab limestone. Do you know in between those layers there, there's supposed to be 130 million years missing?
Erosion exists, you complete fuckwit! That and a complete lack of deposition, just because they weren't laid down one after the other, doesn't mean it can't happen.
It's just not there. It never was there. But when you're looking at where the canyon itself was really lifted up, these are the Tapete sandstones here that are sitting on the basement rocks where we would say the flood first began, and you notice how they're all bent. And when you look at that, I want you to be thinking about this. You see, Psalm 103 says, basically that God raised up the mountains, sank the ocean basins. This could perhaps be one of the ways in which God ended the flood. The point is...
you don't have a point and just wanted to show a pretty picture of curvy rocks?
That when you... Or was it Psalm 107? I think I just had a brain freeze. Anyway, so the point is, when you go to the Grand Canyon, you see that whole area that's raised up. want you to think about this. People say there's not enough water on the earth for a flood. Well, actually, if you actually smoothed out the whole earth, the ocean basins and the mountains, and made it a smooth earth, there's enough water right now to cover it to a depth of 2 miles. See, when we say there's not enough water to cover the earth, what we're saying is we're assuming the earth today was the same as it was before the flood.
Lucky for us, that isn't our only argument. In fact, even if you are correct, there is still so much evidence that the flood did not happen that I can guarantee it didn't happen. So, well done.
But I don't believe the mountains were as high and the ocean basins were as deep. And in fact, I believe that a way in which God ended the flood was to raise up the mountains, lower the ocean basins, so the water pours up into the oceans where it is today.
That sounds absolutely cataclysmic. I wonder why Noah didn't record earth-shattering earthquakes in the Bible. Seems like an odd act of God to leave out, but I guess that's just mysterious ways.
And this happened right here because when you look at these rocks, and now researcher Dr. Andrew Snelling, our head of research here and geologist, is doing more and more research on these rocks here, showing they were lifted up when they were soft. You see, evolutionists teach us, oh, they had to be laid down over millions of years and they hardened into rock, and then over millions of years of heat and pressure they were raised up. Then you'd see them all broken and you'd see metamorphic processes. You don't see any of that. It all fits with the fact they were raised up when they were soft, we would say at the end of the flood. And then that caused...
Rocks don't get soft when they're wet, Ken. They get soft when they're hot. Well, more accurately, they get malleable, but I digress. When a very hot rock has pressure applied, it can bend without fracturing. That's well known. How the fuck did you miss that?
a massive dam because you can see areas behind the Grand Canyon where there were once vast lakes, they're not there today, holding leftover waters from the flood and rains after the flood, and the sediment is still soft, and this has all been lifted up, and then this is like a dam, and this is the Colorado River, then the dam breaks and the water catastrophically gouges out the canyon to allow the Colorado River to come through, and when you look downstream, you'll see surge deposits, sediment that was washed out, that was catastrophically deposited, not slowly over millions of years, but catastrophically, all consistent with a global flood.
That is quite literally impossible. The rock could not have been eroded that quickly. Even if it could, your model still wouldn't be indicative of reality because, just because something was deposited quickly, doesn't mean that it had to be your fucking flood.
Isn't it exciting being a Christian?
Oh, for fuck's sake, it's so mind-numbing. Also, please don't conflate yourself with all Christians. There are way too many smart Christians for you to earn that moniker. In any case, that wraps up today's video. Thank you. I hope it wasn't too brain dead for you all, but as you can probably tell, geology is not my forte. I can't wait to finish this series and deliver you some more quality content. One more video to go and we can finally be done with this cretin. Well, if you enjoyed the video, maybe subscribe. Feel free to rate and leave feedback. I can assure you all of it helps. With that being said, I will see you next Thursday.